Starting the program in 2 minutes. Please take your seat and don't be afraid to go to the seats in the front of the room.
I've been reading books of old, the legends and the myths.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Rochelle Ferrara, Senior Director of Marketing and Enterprise Sales for Brasillaire, a Henry Schein company, and PWH Chair-elect.
Good morning. Welcome to the final day of our Leadership Summit. Look at all these faces. So what about that event last night? Right? It's a great event. And this picture, this just makes us happy. You know, as we sat there last night and we started to really reflect the eloquent words of Mark Seitz. Thank you again, Mark, for your sponsorship, NDC, of our dinner last evening. It was really touching, some of the words that you said, and we thought about the industry coming together. So, you know, this event truly was about leadership, and it was also about bringing the industry together to raise the talent bench in our industry, and to truly take the industry, men and women together, and to, again, raise that bench and bring us together as leaders. So again, we truly appreciate all of the events and all of your attendance this morning. It's interesting too because through a lot of the discussions that we all had together, there were a couple words that came up yesterday to really sum up yesterday's event. And one key word came up, and it was the word ownership. Ownership, whether you're an aspiring leader in the audience and as an attendee, taking ownership of your own career path as you go along the way, or you're a business leader, or you're managing a division. It's what are we going to do with all this amazing information and this content that we've taken in? What are we going to do as we move on? And it's really working together, collaborating as an industry, raising that bar as leaders. So as we take in information today, again, collaborating as leaders together, that's what we really want to do. We want to take that, we want to collaborate, and we want to take that ownership and responsibility, because that's really what we have. We think about John Bauman's message, that video that he shared, because at the end of the day, it goes back to the patient, doesn't it? As leaders in our industry, we want to be able to lead our teams to be able to serve our patients in our industry and our customers. So I have the privilege this morning of introducing Brad Connett. Brad Connett is the U.S. Medical President of Henry Schein. But before I bring him up here, I could, of course, introduce him in the traditional way. I could talk to you a little bit about his bio. Many of you know Brad Connett. He was a former chairman of HIDA. A little while ago, I had the privilege, and many of you have had possibly the privilege of watching him get inducted into the Hall of Fame, which is a very prestigious honor in our industry. But I'm going to introduce you to Brad my way, a little bit about my story, because about 11 years ago, as maybe a rookie, I could say, within the Henry Schein world, I approached Brad. He's a very approachable leader. And I kind of tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, Brad, I have aspirations of being a leader in our company one day, possibly our industry, and I need your advice. Would you mind just sharing with me a couple of tips of how you got to be where you did? Because I observed him, like other leaders, but I was really watching him and his demeanor. And what he said to me was, well, Rochelle, there's this group in our industry. It's called Professional Women in Healthcare. And I'm not sure if many women within the Henry Schein organization are a part of this group, but I really encourage you to look into it. And I'll never forget his words. He said, I believe truly that is going to help you grow professionally and personally. And I can tell all of you today, and I mean this with all of my heart, I don't believe that I would be standing here in front of you as professional woman in healthcare's chair-elect. So thank you, Brad, for your mentoring over the years and your support and just advocating professional women in healthcare and just myself and my career path. So thank you for your support. Please join me on the stage.
That's cool. Thanks. Love you.
Thank you.
Good. Hey, good morning. Thank you. By the way, Rochelle, she didn't tap me on the shoulder. She like slapped me on the shoulder. And yesterday we were partnered. I was partner B. She was partner A. And when we did the fist thing, I mean, I've got blood coming down my thumb. And she almost opened my thumb up. She really did. It's very close to getting that fist undone. So, hey, it's my honor to be here this morning just to introduce this panel. First, I applaud just the participants here. I have a passion for just development. I have a passion for leadership. And just the fact that you're here expresses, so much. So, congratulations and kudos to everybody that's in the room here. I don't know exactly how PWH started. I really don't. I've asked several people and I've gotten several different answers, but I do know the two people that were instrumental when I first heard about it, which are sitting right there in front of me, and it was Ann and Cindy. And when they first brought it up, I just thought it was such a cool idea, and I have been along the ride as an observer, and I've observed just an amazing, amazing journey. So congratulations to you two. And I know there's so many people involved, so I just know that the two of you met probably at Haida when I was golfing. I'm not going to tell the story tonight or today about our story on golf, but it's been an amazing journey. So really congratulations to you two. Julie, awesome. I know when you told me you were doing this summit, and I just didn't know if it would fit in my calendar or whatever, this and that, but I'm just so happy I'm here. And you are an awesome person, and you put this together just beautifully, so really well done. So the panel this morning, we're honored, Henry Schein, we're honored to participate in this. We do a lot of things with PWH. It'll be a great panel. I have the privilege of introducing the moderator. Somebody sent me an email that had a scroll, like there was this long on him, and I'm not going to bore you with it. He's a dear friend of mine, so it's really easy for me to do that, and it's Matt Rohn. Matt and I go back until 2000 when he took over the chairman, president and CEO of Haida. And it was a time when things were a little bit easier. In 2000, the business was a little bit easier, and the businesses got complicated. And as the business got more complicated, I have been along the ride with Matt through Haida with many, many other people, being on the board and being fortunate to chair it, to watch the evolution and transformation that we've all gone through as an industry. And Matt is just a great leader who has led the trade association, which all associations have struggled with relevancy and other things, and Matt has kept us really abreast of the situation and just been a wonderful leader for us as an industry. So it's my privilege to introduce Matt for the panel that you're going to moderate. So Matt, come on up. Awesome.
Well, thank you, Brad, and Henry Schein for sponsoring this session this morning. It's my pleasure to be facilitating, so thank you to PWH for that opportunity, Julie. Appreciate it. And I'm glad you all have joined us this morning for what will be a very insightful opening session. I'm always interested in people's personal stories. When we interact with people, whether they're your coworkers at work or in a session such as this, really you see about 1% of the person. And so what we're going to do this morning is invite some leaders to the stage to share maybe more than the 1% and understand. We always see the person, but we don't understand their personal journeys and what they've learned along the way. So that's really always been a fascinating part of my job here at Haida and at PWH. So let's not waste any more time. I'm going to invite our panelists to join me on the stage. Let me do some brief introductions so everybody knows everybody. Our panelist today, just to my left, is Dr. Emily Chapman. She's the Chief Medical Officer for Children's Minnesota. where she supports the employed and independent professional staff of that hospital system. She's also a practicing pediatric hospitalist and previously owned her own practice. She trained at Dartmouth Medical School and the University of Minnesota. Colleen Risk, to the far end of the stage, is the Chief People Officer for Vizient, where her responsibilities include the experience for members, customers, and suppliers. She's held a number of different responsibilities over the years at Vizient and BHA, ranging from human resources, organizational development, and all the way over to public affairs. Previously, she managed large multi-specialty group practices in the regional and national areas, and she's a graduate of the University of Iowa, earning both an undergrad and master's degree in business and health administration. Mark Seitz is president and CEO of NDC, which is a leading provider of healthcare supply chain solutions based in Nashville. Prior to joining in NDC, Mark would practice law at a large regional firm. He was also Assistant Attorney General for the state of Tennessee and was the 2016 recipient of HIDA's John Sasson Leadership Award. I've enjoyed Mark's involvement in HIDA on the board of directors for many years, and he got his law degree from Tulane University. And Jerry LaDuca is the president of Ducal Corporation, a leading provider of medical, dental, veterinary supplies. He started out as a sales rep and stayed with his first medical startup through the IPO process, founding Ducal Corporation in 1991. Jerry is currently on the board of HIDA's Educational Foundation, so I've enjoyed his company and his guidance there. And he was recently president of HMMC, which is Healthcare Manufacturing Management Council. He mentors students and has served in the Executive in Residence program at St. John's University, his alma mater, where he earned degrees in marketing and management. So at first, so our format today is going to be some prepared questions that I have for the panelists, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, so get your questions ready. And as you can see, we've assembled a diverse panel across healthcare, business, startups, legal, human resources, supply chain. So we have a wealth of personal stories, but also a wealth of experiences and insights to bring to you today. So with that, let's just jump right in, and let's talk about leadership. There's a leadership summit here, and PWH's first leadership summit. How do you define leadership? What is it, and what is it not? Colleen?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I just want to say it was a fabulous conference yesterday, and I learned something. I learned it from Sarah, and that was that when you are going to make a presentation or give a talk, you should have a visual. So last night I thought about what is my visual that's going to help me tell my story here today. So my visual is, how many of you are familiar with the movie The Wizard of Oz? Okay, good. That helps. That helps a lot. Okay, so I was recently helping my team prepare for our leadership development journey, and it's something that we're kind of reinvigorating in our organization. And I was asked, okay, you have to pick one character from The Wizard of Oz, one of the leading characters from The Wizard of Oz, and that would describe how you feel about leadership and how you want to be thought about from leadership. This is easy. Okay, it's really easy. I'm a person that drives for results. I like to bring other people along. I like to know where I'm going, and I like to get there. Okay, so it's Dorothy, right? It's Dorothy, and she got the dog and she got the shoes. So why wouldn't you want to be Dorothy? Okay, and the gentleman said, no. Dorothy was a narrator. Never thought about Dorothy as a narrator of The Wizard of Oz. So you have to pick one of the three. So, okay, so heart, brain, courage. And I said, I picked the lion. I picked courage. I think leadership is about courage, and it's the courage to have conviction. It's the courage to stand behind the decisions you make. Decisions are tough, but it's tougher to stand behind the decision. It's easy somewhat to sit in a room and say, okay, we're going to go down this path. It's a lot harder to go out and stand in front of 3,500 employees and say, we're going down this path and this is what it means for you. And for some it may be good, and for some maybe not so good. So I pick courage as one of the key characteristics of a strong leader.
Any examples you have from your experience where you've stepped out?
I've stepped out in a lot of different ways. And I do not have a traditional career path. I think you mentioned that I started out in hospital administration, and my last job on the provider side was running a large multi-specialty faculty practice plan. For a reason, I've changed careers twice. Both had to do with a values issue, if you will. And I stepped away from the provider side and stepped into what was then VHA, and into a role where I was to help our members actually with their physician practices. That lasted about 12 months. And then I was asked to take on different things. And I think the biggest step out was when I was asked to take over human resources. I am not a human resource expert. I had no training in human resources. I clearly had dealt with a lot of human resource issues. You can't get away from that running a medical group, but no formal training. And the reason I was asked is because we had a bit of a revolving door, and healthcare is complex, and VHA was complex, Vizient is complex. And at the time we said, rather than going out and recruiting an expert in human resources who doesn't know our business, who doesn't know our membership, let's take one of our current leaders. And at the time I was running our clinical programs, our regional networks, and I said, I'll try it. So 2 weeks into the role, one of my jobs is to staff and manage the compensation committee. And our compensation committee is the powerhouse of our board. It's the chairs of all the other committees. So they're the established folks. They're the ones that are really driving things. And we walked in, and I was introduced, and I knew them because I had interacted with them, but not in this capacity. And my boss at the time, our CEO, said, this is Colleen, and as you know, I've asked her to take on human resources. And he said, by the way, she knows nothing. He was too far away for me to kick him under the table. But then think about that. Think about what he did. He gave me air cover. He gave me air cover, and he said to them, I've asked her to do this. We have a methodology. We have an annual calendar, and don't ask her tough questions about the retirement plan. Don't ask her about, the 401(k), whatever. Just know in a year she'll know this. And I just thought that was a great moment of a leader, asking you to take a risk, if you will, but then being there for you to make sure that you had that glide path.
Great story. Great story. Thank you. Jerry, what is leadership and what is it not?
So leadership for me, movie relevance would probably be more Animal House than the Wizard of Oz.
All right, Wizard of Oz, Animal House. Okay, got it.
It's true.
That's clear direction for everybody here. Okay.
A lot of this leadership comes from grounding. My dad was a man that was the youngest of three, but got married soon after the Depression. So, working hard and work ethic was very, very important to him. I always remember that I think when they got married, Dad made $5 a week, Mom made $7. And she would say, if we actually had an extra $1, your dad would go out on Friday nights with his friends and drink and play cards and never win all the time. So, the work ethic for me was one that was instilled from a very, very young age. My dad also at one point had said, it's nice to be successful in life, but the true value of the success to be able to measure is not so much in what you've attained, but in the lives that you've been able to touch. And I guess 3 or 4 years ago was one Christmas, and I got a Christmas card from a gentleman that was a sales rep at Medical Action that I worked with 30 years ago, who thanked me for touching his life and spending time with him, and that he had things that he carried forth that he had learned for a long, long time. So it is nice to be able to do that. I think it's very, very important. My leadership is one I don't ask people to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. So I wash the dishes, I grab the plunger, I'll do whatever necessary that's there. And you try to lead with realistic goals. I think that being able to run a company that is able to grow, you need to have everyone involved and engaged in terms of what the goals are within the organization, and be able to communicate effectively to get the message out. Learned a long time ago, even if you own something and you run it, unless you get everybody believing in you, you don't get anything done. So, I'm not one to carry a big stick and yell, but it's a lot easier to manage, to move things forward if you have a management style that leads by example, and that you can get engagement with the entire team, whether they be folks that unload trucks or folks that help us run the company. You need buy-in from an organization. So those are the things I think that are most important.
Great points, great story. Next question, what leadership skill do you feel you've grown the most in throughout your career? Emily?
I think I would say probably the art of not jumping in. Sit back, listen, think, see what others contribute, and let that develop around you. That through that you begin to determine what problems do need to be solved and which problems actually just need to be acknowledged, and you need to sit with them and so forth. And I think that was when you first take on leadership, you have a tendency to think you're supposed to white knuckle it and control things. What I think I've grown in is the ability to kind of, as some people will say, let's go with the movie theme, Bull Durham, the whole hold it like an egg sort of thing with the baseball, is that you're going to get a lot further if you sit back and let genius develop from within your team rather than thinking you're bringing the solution yourself.
Mark?
I would echo that point just a little bit. When I first arrived in the industry, I knew very little, and in a very similar situation to yours. And folks will give you a chance if you have some humility when you enter the situation. You acknowledge your limitations. And I was a strange choice in many people's eyes to take over the leadership at NDC. I'll use a car analogy. It's like I was barely had a Volkswagen that could run, and somebody tossed me the keys to a Ferrari and said, "Here, it's yours. See what you can do with it." And so I was pretty quickly in over my head, and I too had to learn to watch and let things unfold in front of me and not try and control the decision making. It would have been a mistake to do that early on. But another very tactical point, maybe this comes from a career as a lawyer and the son of a federal judge. You owe it to the people that you're leading to have subject matter competence. And they'll give you time. If you're put in a new situation, you have to learn new skills. But one of the things I would say that I've held on to, and HIDA was a big help to me, immersing myself with people that knew the business, really doing the homework, voraciously reading the publications that are out there about the challenges that existed, networking with people like you in the room and folks on the HIDA board. So you make sure whatever leadership responsibility that you have, you don't necessarily have to come equipped with all the skills if you'll acknowledge your limitations with some humility, but you do have an ethical and a moral obligation to make yourself an expert, a subject matter expert in the area that you're leading people. You owe it to those people to have that competency.
Great thoughts. Thank you. Next question. As you look for and develop leaders throughout your organization, what skills and characteristics stand out to you? Jerry?
Self-starters. I think someone that is able to, within an organization as companies grow, see things that need to be done and not necessarily ask for changes in structure, changes in titles, raises, whatever that would come, but see needs that have to be done and start to do those jobs. And we have had career paths within our company, and as we started 26 years ago, it was a couple of us, and today we have hundreds of us. And along with that, I think everyone wakes up with the same amount of wants and needs as anyone else, regardless of where you are in life. You've got mortgages to pay, you've got kids you want to raise, you've got college tuitions you have to think about. So having the ability to have a career path, I think, is one that is very, very important. Within DuCal, the career paths, and there are a number of them, have come from long-term employees that as the company has grown, they have seen the things that need to be done and they start to do it. We recently had an outside hire, and it's always difficult to bring an outsider into the company, irregardless of whatever testing you do and personality evaluations you do. Putting all the plugs together and pieces is, I think, a very, very difficult thing to do. And at times their perceptions will come in from other experiences that they've had, and there's an assimilation challenge and an assimilation opportunity that's there. But within the company ourselves, being able to grow and seeing things that need to be done and jumping in and doing those have been the most beneficial to the company and I think to those individual careers.
Colleen?
I would want to add to that. have a saying in Vizient where it's very easy to raise your hand and point out a problem, but raise your hand and help find the solution to that and being a self-starter and tackling something that maybe isn't even in your area of responsibility. But the other thing I would say that's paramount to Vizient is values. And we work under the Pat Lencioni concept and framework of values, and we have 4 different sets of values. And we have our permission to play values, and those are kind of, you got to have those, you know, to get in the door and to stay in the door. And then we have core values, and the core values are those things that you should feel after you've experienced and worked with someone from Vizient. And then we have our aspirational values, and those are those behaviors that we think will propel us forward, and we want to bring those into the organization. And then we have my favorite, and those are accidental values. And those are the behaviors that you know exist in your organization, and you put them on the paper, you put them in our playbook, and you call them out. And you say, these are the behaviors we want to drive out of our organization. And what it gives you is actually a framework to have a dialogue to call people out when they're demonstrating those accidental values. And we talk about them as a leadership team every year. We revisit them and we say, have we done that? Have we driven that behavior out of this organization? And I'm happy to say, over time, yes. There's one on there that's been on there since the beginning of time when we did this, and we're still working on that. But we look for, do leaders exhibit those values on a consistent basis?
So the accidental value is something you're trying to drive out of it.
Want it out of the organization, yeah.
That's very interesting. What's an example of that?
An example is conflict avoidance would be one. Another one is optional buy-in, where you sit in the room, you think you have consensus, you agree, and then you go out and you don't support the decision. And sometimes actively go against the decision. And to just be honest, that's the one that's been on our playbook since I've been there. So.
Good thoughts. Mark?
I just think that's a really articulate way to describe being a little bit two-faced in a corporate setting.
There you go.
Optional buy-in.
Two-faced, yeah.
So I've experienced optional buy-in in our organization as well. So I'm going to start using that now. I know we've got NDC folks here, so let's start using optional buy-in. I think that's
How'd that work out for you?
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I want to say that to actually to bring some architecture around what behaviors you don't want to see in an organization is a new concept to me. We sort of, I think the way that we approached it at NDC is we know what we like, but it was less defined. And I think that's a really great tip that we got here today was to define with some precision and publish what the unacceptable behaviors are. One of the things that I'm really, really weak at is being clear with defining what my expectations are for people. And I have a lot of direct reports, and I was raised this way, so you never knew if you were meeting expectations, but boy, you're going to try really hard to do so because you're trying to please somebody. First it was my father, and then it was, now I'm trying to please my employees. But I think this is a great lesson for me, and I've got a great learning today, is I think I need to do a much better job of defining with precision, what the expectations are for the folks that are working with me. It's worked out really well, and I think some of that's the caliber of people that we have at NDC. They emulate the values that get recognized inside of NDC, and as a natural consequence of that, some of the bad behavior sloughs away. One of the chief measuring sticks that I have, and people probably that are close to me are tired of hearing this, is the quickest way to get on the wrong side of Mark Seitz is not to speak to Paula when you step off the elevator in the lobby in the morning at the corporate offices. And people, we've gotten so large and added so many people, not everybody knows I'm there, but I'm paying very close attention to how you treat your colleagues, regardless of what particular responsibility that they have. Nothing can destroy a company faster than people if they're not treating their colleagues with mutual respect. And mutual respect is not lip service. It's caring about what's going on in the person's life that you interact with. It's trying to take the time to get to know somebody inside your organization that you don't necessarily work with or have a direct line of responsibility for or to. It's all these things. It's culture, which is an oversimplification of what culture is, but culture starts with a shared respect for the people that are coming to work at your company. I couldn't be more passionate about anything else. The rest of the problems are easier to solve if everybody has a shared value of treating their coworkers with respect.
Emily?
Very well said.
Thank you.
How do people stand out at Children's Minnesota in your mind? What catches your attention as a leader?
Well, I would say if I'm looking at people for leadership roles, is that kind of what you're saying? I think there's a ton of things that you're looking for, but I think probably the most critical for me is probably humility. Because humility begets listening, it begets partnership, it begets a willingness to change course and be influenced by others. And so I think as we work together increasingly in teams, the opportunity for someone to take the input of a multiplicity of views in order to create something greater than an individual. We need to be more than the sum of our parts. Arrogance tends to absolutely crush an initiative, and humility, I feel like, allows it to sort of grow and flourish. So I think most critically, I would look for that in a potential leader at the organization.
Great thoughts. What's, I think, a great takeaway from this question is that everybody's paying attention to everything you do and say every day, and in both critical and negative and positive ways. So interesting feedback. Thank you. How do you create and sustain an inclusive, diverse culture within your team? Mark?
I think the ability to have an equal opportunity to contribute, regardless of what your title might be inside the organization. It's tough to be really good at it, and we're still working on it. The first thing that I did when I arrived at NDC was create an executive committee. When Mr. Stover was there, it was less complicated, and he obviously had grown up in the industry and had a command of the subject matter. So I surrounded myself with certain leaders inside the organization and tried to broaden the leadership responsibility across more people. So the more, I think for me, I think the best answer to that question is to allow as many people as possible to contribute to the problems in the company that you're trying to solve. And it starts with simple things like all employee meetings, but we've got a lot of project management going on right now. We've acquired 3 or 4 companies in the home care space, and we're integrating those companies, which are around the United States, into a single platform. And we've really tasked everybody, not with just their regular job, but as project managers, work stream managers, to do this integration of all these companies. So if you're in finance, or you're in operations, or you're in customer service, you have a role with the new exciting things that are going on in the company. We're asking people, in addition to their regular job, we're asking them to step out of their role and contribute to these new initiatives that are going on in the company. And that's just a great way to test people, to make them feel involved, engaged. People get stale, and I actually learned this, and I want to thank Henry Schein, by the way. I should have earlier for sponsoring this, but I was at a Dental Trade Association meeting and listened to Stanley Bergman talk about his leadership philosophy, which was change people's roles. And I know probably people at Henry Schein that are here have to live through some of the challenges of that. But we've done that at NDC. There's one person in the room, and she knows who she is. There's a testimony to how successful people can be when they're stretched from their original competency and put in a position where you think they can contribute, but it requires them to grow. So broaden the leadership contribution in your organization. It's a mistake to think that it's centralized in any particular person or people. And the more you can broaden leadership contribution, you'll find new leaders, they'll feel empowered, and you'll be a better company for it.
What's one thing you do to set the tone for the culture? What's a concrete thing you do over and over that says?
I walk the office every single day when I arrive there in the morning, and I speak to people about something that's unique to their particular either professional situation or their personal situation. We've been hiring a lot of people. Every 10 months, I get all the new hires in the boardroom, and So I say, I don't know your name, and I'm embarrassed that I don't. Please tell me something about your story and why you chose to invest in NDC. Just staying connected to your people, being accessible. It's an open door policy, but it's so much more than that. I call myself a problem solver for the problems that my people have, whether they're professional or personal. I've got a little advantage. I still have a law degree and a license to practice law. But on a serious note,
Was that a threat? Or,
it's actually a benefit. It's a benefit, and one of the things I do take a lot of pleasure in doing is helping solve problems for people and they've got access to resources through their colleagues at NDC that they couldn't otherwise have. So again, just invest in your folks and take the time to walk the floors and be visible in your office.
Very good. Colleen, setting the culture, how do you set the tone?
Well, it's interesting. We're coming off of merging 5 different companies, and we literally doubled the size of our company from a revenue standpoint and an employee standpoint over about 2 years, maybe a little longer than that. And what we did going into this, and we did a merger and then we did a major acquisition, is we did a cultural assessment. And we asked all the employees from Legacy VHA and Novation, which were the acquirer companies, but also those from UHC and MedAssets, all the same set of questions. And what we were striving for was to figure out what's similar across these organizations, what's different across these organizations, but more importantly, what's important to you as an employee that's coming into this new integrated one Vizient, if you will. And I think it was mentioned the other day that we had the advantage that first and foremost, it's about our members. We exist to serve the provider side of healthcare. And MedAssets called them clients. The VHA called them members. We took a stand and we said, they're our members, okay? So we had that going for us, but then we also had this just unbelievable sense of community and wanting to give back. And so we've looked at that, we've looked hard at that, and we took elements from each of the companies about what their corporate citizenship was about and what programs did they put in place and gave that, and it was a big step forward in terms of, at Vizient, you can take 5 days off to volunteer. And as long as it's a legitimate charity, you get that time and you go do it. And we don't need to know, and your manager doesn't need to know. They just need to prove that you can be gone on that particular day. We match volunteer hours with dollars. And so that's a great way to go give in your community, and then we'll match up to $600 a year for the hours that you give. So it was finding some of those elements that people could really get their heart around, and then infusing them. And then I will say that we're coming off of integration. We're really looking hard at inclusion and diversity, and that's the approach that we take to it. It's inclusion first, and we think that will beget diversity. And part of inclusion, you talked about that, it's let people be in the room, leave your title at the door, if you will, and feel like you can speak up and your opinion will be heard. So that's our focus.
In a nutshell, for somebody who doesn't know Vizient at all, how would you describe your culture?
I would say, in a nutshell, in a word, I would say family. I would say family, and it's about, someone mentioned, it's about having other people's backs. It's about respect. Our receptionist, Glenda's 80 years old. 80 years old, yeah. And who's the first person we go ask when we have an executive that we're hiring from outside? Yeah. You go talk to Glenda, because if Glenda wasn't treated with respect and as family, it's going to come up later. So and I'd be interested. We have a huge contingent of Vizient folks here. Go Orange, but that's what I would walk away with, because I think with family, you're rooting for each other. You have their backs. You appreciate them, you're with them during tough times, and so that's how I would say it.
I just learned something. Apparently you have a football team. Go Orange. That's a first in healthcare. Thank you.
Could be ultimate frisbee.
Yeah, it could be frisbee.
Yeah.
So let's talk about stories. I mean, we all have mentors and people we learn from over the years. What's a pearl of wisdom, leadership wisdom, that has influenced you the most? Jerry?
Spent 41 years so far in the industry. In '77, I joined a startup company called Medical Action. I was the third person that was there. And as we went out with a value proposition at that point for the way that the industry was, we did our best to build a company. And we were enthusiastic, optimistic people. And during the 11 years, made a whole lot of mistakes. So in 26 years ago, 27 now, when we started DuCal, I was very comfortable that all the mistakes that could ever be made have already been made, and that I would be very well equipped to start the business. And the reality was that there were a whole set of new mistakes that I was able to find and have to try to solve. So, I'm always very optimistic. I try to empower all of our teammates that were within the company to make their own decisions, to present ideas. And at times you let them run a little bit longer than you have to, but it's based on who I am and wanting people to have that opportunity to present ideas and see them to fruition. But the reality is, at times you have a lot of experience in the past, and you kind of outweigh a little bit the experience that you know what the conclusion's going to be, and sometimes you don't stop those things that are there. But this is a process. It's who we are as a company, and I think that the things that we want to do as an organization to stimulate creative thinking and empower people to expand their careers and take on more responsibilities and grow is an important thing to do.
Yeah, you never forget those lessons you learn from your own mistakes.
Right.
Those are the ones that stick with you. Mm-hmm. So Emily, from the provider's perspective, pearl of wisdom, leadership from your world.
Well, I'd say, for me, it's interesting how far back these things go. I would probably call up, just wait, my college graduation commencement speaker. I mean, those are usually completely throwaway, but actually, this one was phenomenal. And if you're old enough, you might know Neil Simon, who's a playwright. And Neil Simon was our speaker. Great delivery. But there was one thing in his speech where he said, don't listen to those who say it isn't done that way. Maybe it isn't, but maybe you will. And I think that has stuck with me, that I have taken twists and turns that people say. I always laugh when someone says, oh, my niece wants to be a doctor. I'm going to how about if you sit down with her and tell her how you did it? I'm like, oh, Lord, you do not do anything that I did. It takes this path. And just the decision that when I bump into something that I need to do in a leadership role, I'll know that there's a way that it's supposed to be done, or there's a traditional assumption about this. And often my instinct is, I don't think so. And people will sort of say, but it's not done that way. So just that, that perspective that maybe you will. The other one is much more recent, and that is my son said to me, he's studied military history and he's in training to be an officer, and he grabbed this from someplace. He said, you can either be somebody or you can do something. And I think as leaders, you have to be cautious not to get caught up in being somebody and being overly concerned about what you're building as your own personal legacy or as your own personal persona, lest you don't do anything. And that one stuck with me.
I think that one's going to stick with me too. That was awesome. Thank you. What was the hardest business lesson you've ever learned, and why? Mark?
That's a long list. And, and to Jerry's point, still learning. It's hard for me to sort of identify a hardest business lesson. I think I've talked a lot about the soft things, and that's not the right way to describe them, that are essential to having a successful culture in a business. But the business is business, and it has to be successful. And so you have to find a way to have both. And because there's no success for people to keep their jobs, to career path people. Somebody has to be responsible for ensuring that the mix of a great culture translates into success in business. You have to have a good value proposition. You have to deliver on that value proposition. You have to treat your customers well, treat your patients well. So there's a whole other side to the equation. And I think the toughest business lesson for me was understanding you can do everything well about the way that you treat people, but you can't lose sight of the fact that it has to translate into success in business. They don't just happen ipso facto, to sound like a lawyer again. It just doesn't happen because you create a great culture. You have to tie that culture in a really tenacious way to what your company is delivering as far as in a capitalist society. And so while we talk about leadership means being successful in business in addition to making sure that you can create an environment where people can thrive and be successful individually.
Work is a lot like a marriage. I've always said that it doesn't matter how long you date, there's going to be surprises after you get married. And the same is at work. We've done a lot of acquisitions as well, and it's probably the biggest challenge that we have, and we spend a lot of time doing our due diligence and putting management teams together and task forces and everything else. And the easy part of these things, I think, is really just getting the money to buy them. The work starts after you close, and there are so many things and so many moving targets, and as much as you can prepare, there's always going to be surprises that are out there. So I think, being able to address them quickly, being able to respond and react to them is critical with organizations and anyone that's going to try to hit the numbers that you have. And you do mathematical equations when you put these together. Why does this investment make sense? What is it going to do for the company, for the market, for the expansion, for the employee opportunities? All of those things you take into consideration, and you really put your best foot forward. And even with the experience and the teams and all the work that you do, there's always going to be surprises. So I think being able to respond and acknowledge what those are, there will be mistakes along with surprises that are there and things that you simply miss, even regardless of how many things you have done before and the experience that you have. So I think being cognizant of that is a big part of the ability to grow, build, respond, recover, and be sure that you have a career path and a successful business.
Any particular concrete example of that? Something that you've taken away?
Some of it's to make decisions quicker. There's a foregone conclusion where you're going to go, and you still allow it to go there at times, hoping for the best, for the weather to clear or something like that. But I think at times you just have to make a decision at times, and sooner is better.
Yes. They don't get better with age, that's for sure.
Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew it was something, yeah.
How do you deal with conflict among your team, Emily?
I think probably there's kind of two approaches, and you might need to employ both of them at the same time. One is external, and the other is internal, if you will. So first of all, hopefully you put the right people on the team to begin with. But then when you don't, sort of the external approach or the leader's responsibility, I think, is to take a look at that team and to see if there isn't maybe a minor change or a single change that you might be able to make that really will recover the whole dynamic of that group. Because I think that's often available. And then the internal part is also, is to have a resolution of the conflict grow from within the group. And I find that sometimes it really takes just sort of calling it out, is to just kind of walk in with your group and say, it struck me, I dreaded coming to this meeting. This feels lousy. Does it feel lousy to anybody else? And see where you can go. Because if you're noticing the dysfunction, likely those folks who are engaged in it are actually more uncomfortable than you are, and are looking for a relief, a way out of that. And if you can open it up and unravel that and get people to admit, yeah, this does kind of suck, and this isn't, I'm not enjoying this isn't the way I want to show up to this, and then help them refocus on, what were we trying to do here anyway? Let's step back for a minute, hang on, and see where you have that common why and that alignment, and start to rebuild the conversation from a different perspective.
Mark?
So the doctor's way more mature than me, which is probably self-evident to those of you that know me, but I'm like, oh, come on, are you freaking kidding me? That's sort of how I call it out, too. And so I suggest a cage match to try and get the sort of loose. Do you guys want a cage match or however you want to deal with it? But I think exposing it, and I'm not the best at this either because I'm a very much a reactor and react emotionally, and I am working on my maturity and my patience. But there's, and I mean that sincerely, there is so much genuine tragedy in the world. I mean, it's about perspective. So I try and sort of lighten the mood just a little bit. And typically, if it's a business issue, they're not life and death. It might be different for these folks that are dealing with providers, when you can have some very serious consequences to your leadership responsibilities. But for us, it's an order of magnitude. So try and bring perspective to the situation. Have them deal with each other, and you've got the wrong people working for you if in most cases they can't find a resolution without destroying each other's credibility.
Jerry?
At DuCal, every now and then we have a saying, it's time to put all the furniture outside and rearrange it when you come back in. So having a fresh look, I think, at times and rearranging that furniture to get a different perspective on it is something that's very important. I share some of your business values as well, and we're fortunate enough to be a private company. So, I don't have a stock looming over my head. I don't have to worry about earnings per share. And the decisions we make as a company are what is fundamentally right for our family, our company, our banking relationships, our customers, and our suppliers. So if we happen to have a little bit less and we didn't perform or hit the numbers, but it didn't interrupt people's lives, I think the quality of life and the quality of who we are as a company and the image we project and the culture that we have is one that outweighs sometimes the need. And certainly it's not a hobby. We do want to run profitable businesses, but I think we make more decisions for the right reasons than for the wrong reasons.
Great point. Great discussion. We want to open it up for questions from the audience. We have 2 mic runners, so Mike.
This is like old times. I've asked.
It's shocking that you would have asked the first question.
Mike.
It's a shock.
I've asked Matt Rowan so many questions. This is the first non-political question, so I'm pretty excited about it.
Getting ready to say, make America great again.
First of all, I want to thank the panel. What a great panel. What a great discussion. And, going way back, I hate to admit that, but I was calling on accounts that joined VHA when VHA started. So it's been a long time, and I've seen a lot in 45 years in the industry. And, with this kind of group, and this includes you, Matt, because everybody's here basically concerned about their careers and maybe their next steps, opportunities. I'd just like to know from each of you, what is your biggest worry about our industry going forward? For instance, it could be self-distribution for a distribution guy. It could be the expansion of GPOs into private brand and how, basically we're down to 15 acute care distributors in the United States, Matt. You've seen the change at HIDA over the past 15 years, and that kind of keeps me awake because I love this industry so much. So I'd just like to know from the industry, what's your biggest concern going forward with our industry?
Jump in. Anybody?
I guess for me, and this doesn't really relate to Vizient directly, I worry about becoming a one-payer system. And what, in some ways, I think there's some things that would be advantageous about that. I think there's just a whole lot of bureaucracy that providers have to put up with, and maybe some of that would go away. But the freedom of choice that a patient has still, and like them or not, what the large insurers do bring to the marketplace, and that's something that's popped up for me recently. That there's just some things that are in motion that it could take 1 or 2 things that might trigger that, and that's concerning to me.
I guess I'll go next. We'll just move across the panel. But I want to stay in control of the situation as much as I can. You can't deny these realities that exist out there. But I watched, and I was quaking in my boots when I first arrived at NDC about consolidation among independent distribution. You just got to innovate quicker. The pace of change in business with all the technology that's leveraged is incredible. Take risks sooner. There's no doubt that there's headwinds, but there's a lot of tailwinds too. Some of the tailwinds are very unfortunate, and that is if you look at the health from a demographic standpoint of the American population, it's a sad situation. But there's some really exciting things going on. So people are going to need health care. they're going to need to continue to find innovative ways to deliver it, trying to keep up with the pace of change. It's so complex when you start talking about the payer system, which impacts you so meaningfully, and the rest of us to some degree. But make changes, innovate, look for new ways to provide the products and services that you provide in different venues. We still need to get to these patients. They're going to need us. Watch how technology innovates around the vaccine space and how medicine improves, and genetic engineering, genetic medicine, concierge medicine. It could be a sad thing or a good thing, but you need to position yourself to take advantage of private pay medicine. Particularly if we go to a one-payer system. So just try and stay as optimistic as possible is what I would encourage everyone to do, and then accelerate the way that you attack changing your organization and your approach to business. And you'll find that good things can come from it. You need good, smart people. Lean on the people that you're working with. Bring more people into the conversation that are direct on the ground in the accounts where care is being delivered. And don't manage from the inside out, manage from the outside in, and just change faster and faster.
Very good.
Any other thoughts?
So, for me, this would be a 3-drink conversation, for sure. Probably all of us together. Of great concern, and we're watching good people, good industries, good companies no longer be relevant. The value proposition is diminished. They have to retool what they do. So you're seeing a huge surge of consolidation or exit plan for some, saying, hey, we don't have a relevant opportunity. You start to look at the challenges from an organization in terms of what it costs to do business today. My joke with the Affordable Care Act, it was very affordable if you didn't have a job. Anybody who's paying insurance and providing it, it's quadrupled. So it's gotten to be very, very expensive with that. And along with that is the reality that the care in America, our longevity is down, and we're, I think, the 50th healthy country, no longer in the top 10. So we're seeing a decline with that. We're seeing physicians no longer being able to have a good job. You're seeing a New York City policeman having a better career after 20 years than a general practice physician that's out there. So things are changing very, very rapidly. The part that I like is that we have a unit recession-proof business. We're going to continue to age. We're going to get sick. We need health care. So you have to have it. You're going to need the physician, the place to have it given, and the doc and the supplies to go along with that. So we have to be smart enough as businessmen to be sure that we have the relevant value proposition out there, and we're meeting the changes in the industry so that we have the ability from the product mix, from the pricing strategies, to have an opportunity to go in and be the best value solution to how those goods and services are being used. So there's change, and again, healthcare has been pretty much the same for 100 years. The last 5 years, it's never changed as fast. But you look at a lot of the things that are out here, we have a mature business, it's commoditized, and it has to go through upheaval at this point. So, how things are communicated, the internet, there's a lot of good things, but life was a whole lot simpler when you had 3 stations on TV too. But again, this is the world in which we live, and it's our job to be sure that we have a value proposition that can help go ahead and be successful and move companies forward.
Yeah, and I would just echo, I think my greatest concern is exhaustion. That we are, whether it's the pace of change in our industry, the amount of information that's available, the pressures that are causing us to try to work with increasing efficiency, which ought not to be exhausting, but at some point, and that if we don't respond to that pressure correctly, what we will end up with is an industry that is meant to be all about humanity that has very little humanity within it. And I think that's the thing that makes me most concerned is how are we going to maintain space for something that is very slow, really, very deliberate, requires being present and connecting in the context of this environment that is lightning fast and increasingly tumultuous.
A few years ago, Michael Dowling, who runs the Northwell system up in New York, and I guess today there's 22 hospitals or facilities that are there, and he addressed Long Island businessmen, and he said, if I was here 5 years ago, I'd tell you how much money we're making because all of our beds are full. He goes, today I'm going to tell you how much money we're not losing because we're trying to keep our beds empty. Same amount of people still get sick, but where care is being given, how it's being given, it's just changing very rapidly. So I think we're going to continue to see that change happen and more efficient ways to provide care.
Just real quickly, I think the doctor makes an excellent point I lose sight of this sometimes too. I've got a great personal physician, that's worried with all the business issues and all the challenges for a primary care doctor. But when he's in the moment, when he's rounding with his patients, you need to run a practice that's on time, and you need to do the things that people want in order to, but you've got to be in the moment if you're a physician delivering care to a patient. Otherwise, where is the humanity, right? Yeah. I think that's an excellent point you made. Thanks for sharing it with us.
I think in healthcare, we're experiencing the rate of change that has been commonplace in other industries. The differentiator is that there's a human component that doesn't exist in telecom or cable TV or what have you. So that change is hard enough, the corporate change, but then it all comes down to a patient, two humans interacting or a group of humans interacting with a patient, and I think that's what makes healthcare that much more difficult to keep up with the pace of change. I think we have a question here.
Yes, you all touched a bit on some of the macroeconomic pressures. One of them, I would believe, is unemployment, and how does that impact what's happening, certainly on the provider side, but in all of your organizations, how are you dealing with that at both ends of the spectrum? Because personally, I think 50 is the new 30, so I might want to work until 80 instead of being exhausted, and how are you accommodating that?
Emily?
Well, let me have you clarify your question before you get rid of your mic, though. When you're referring to unemployment, what specifically are you?
Well, on the provider side, obviously, there's going to be a shortage of nurses. There's going to be a shortage of pharmacists, physicians, and how are we accommodating that with technology, with leadership in terms of bringing in younger? How does that impact your business?
Right. Well, I would say that on our side, because the reason I clarified that is, we talk about unemployment as a social problem, and that people are without things like the ability to have employer funded health care and so forth. But on my side of it, what I'm running into is that the unemployment rate is so low that I'm having a really difficult time staffing my organization. Critical things like people being willing to work in an operating room as a staff nurse and deal, and be accepting of, yep, you're supposed to be off at 4:30, but actually what just happened is a case came in and you need to stay till 7:30 and so forth and so on. Or doing radiology in a healthcare setting versus at a outpatient CDI type place or something where you know exactly what your schedule is and where it stops. And we're finding that a lot of people looking at their own life balance, younger generations, millennial and so forth, are starting to say, yeah, that's not so much for me. So how we're having to respond to that, we're finding, is really probably training our own, is recognizing people who are enjoying the environment that they're in and supporting them as they get additional training. I'd say that's the same thing we have to do with our inclusion. I love the inclusion and diversity, by the way. So I'm going to flip that around at our organization when I go back. But the same thing within inclusion and diversity is that we are going to have to support the people that we hope to bring into our organizations through their training and their development, because we can't just sit back and assume that there's going to be a whole group of individuals who are prepared and interested in coming to us.
Colleen, impact of unemployment?
Actually, for us, we're headquartered in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and there's a lot of companies that are leaving California and moving to North Texas, Toyota being one, where they just brought 40,000 jobs, I think, to the Plano area. And so it's the low unemployment rate that is impacting us. Now, it doesn't impact us so much on the sourcing side of the business, but it's really the back office where we're competing with the automobile industry and things of that nature. And I think for us, part of it is we had to, and I actually need to say we are still learning how to be more flexible from the standpoint of work hours, where you work from. It was the bane of my existence to come up with a work from home policy, because I to be honest, I have colleagues who, if they can't see you, you are not producing. And it's like, this is not gonna work here, folks. And so we have to look for those kinds of things that are attractive to individuals that are looking for work-life balance. And we're not hands-on providers. We work with providers. So you can do a lot of our jobs from home if you choose to want to do that. It's trying to be creative with some of those kinds of things.
I'm actually in therapy for supporting work from home. So, you know, I come from a law firm where you showed up in a coat and tie, and it was important to be there. So, but they're wearing me down in a good way, and they are, and it's the right thing to do. I would say what's interesting from the provider, and I once did I did physician staff credentialing and things like that. Was immersed in a little bit of your environment, but I'm way in over my head. But what I'm enjoying seeing is leveraging lesser titles, delivering medicine, providing medicine, right? So there is a shortage of nurses and doctors, and you know, it was this medical licensure world as it evolved. It's finally starting to relax, and there's really committed nurse practitioners that are just, you know, just maybe they didn't have the opportunity or couldn't have afforded economically to have a higher degree. But they're just as passionate about the healing arts, and they're just as competent. I'm not saying you should ever back away from a supervision model where there's medical directors and a physician supervising, you know, complex care. That's not what I'm saying. But for the fundamental things that are going on that need a quicker response, easy disease states that can be diagnosed and identified, I think it's going to be great to see more people with less titles delivering that care and leveraging the people that are interested in doing that. It's a different career path, and that's what we should look at supporting.
Last week, Haida was fortunate enough to schedule the visits to Washington, D.C., and you had hundreds of meetings that were scheduled with senators and congresspeople that were there. And I've done this a number of times, and this year was probably the most informative to me with the political climate, what's going on there. We talked about the unemployment. And the reality is I think every parent wants their kids to do better than they did. So there's a huge whether you're smart enough to do it or not, is to go to college and get your college degree. And as a result, a lot of the trades and the normal jobs that had been done by anybody is just not there anymore. So pretty much from truck drivers to electricians to plumbers to laborers to factory workers, there's a huge shortage in the country today. So, you know, while we want to bring jobs back, it's to who? And it's going to become shortages. So I think it's something that has to be addressed. And, you know, I've got a lot of friends that I enjoy, and they're dear friends for many times, and they're plumbers, and they raise their kids, and they're good guys. They're just handy with their hands. You know, but without them, you have a problem. So I think that, you know, getting back to different types of careers can be careers of respectful results that you can raise families with is something that we've got to get back to.
Yeah, I think adversity is going to drive other kind of change. Well, we have plenty of change already, but now new people need to do the work that was of others to make it all work. Questions? Is there one back here? Yes, in the back.
Oh, right here.
Oh,
sorry. So being in this industry, for those of us in the room and those of us who we work with, we're on the front lines. So we're constantly learning about the changes in healthcare and the services and programs that are available to us. Dr. Chapman, I'm curious, how do you educate your patients and keep them abreast of these programs and services or new services that you're providing? And what are the challenges you have in educating those patients? And then for the rest of you, are you addressing this with your sales teams and the providers that you work with to help them?
So it's interesting, you know, I'm trying to think whether to answer this question as a leader or as a doctor, you know, because they're different.
She said doctor.
Yes, you did say doctor. You know, I think, you know, on the organizational front, you know, it's a matter of sharing what we collectively are capable of doing, you know, and that requires education, which requires competition with every other, you know, information source that is bombarding our society and our poor individuals who are within it. So I think trying to take advantage of those things that are accessible to people, whether it's technology, digital relationships, and so forth, for those folks who have it. Much harder is those communities who do not use that as a mode of communication, where really it has to be a trusted leader within that community who's going to message. Someone mentioned vaccination. We had the situation here in the Twin Cities of a measles outbreak that was 90+% in our Somali population. You have to approach that communication and that experience very, very differently. So really, I think what I do is I bring in people who know what the hell they're doing in those cases. But I remember that as much as we think, or I think I know what my patient or my population or my community needs, and I'm very eager, we make this mistake all the time in healthcare, I'm very eager to tell them what they need and tell them I've got it and don't you want to come get it, that we are very often wrong. And that what we need to do is we need to be a partner and say, what is it that you need? And let me see whether I'm an organization that can help you address that.
Any other thoughts? Question? In the back?
Hi, my name is Melissa, and I'm in a really good mood. My question for you is around Amazon. We know that they're going to make a play to get into the medical space, and I'm curious about whether you've given that some thought and what you think the impact of this will be.
I haven't thought about that at all. What's this?
Did you hear it? No, she is asking
about Amazon.
Amazon moving into the. I might start with that one.
I would just say maybe don't mention the company.
No, we're not.
But
Let's
just
talk about
a
e-commerce solutions and the commoditization of providing healthcare in the country, right? And or however you want to classify it. And that's good advice, giving the lawyer antitrust advice. Thank you. I needed it because I was about to go say some things that were probably off color. Listen, I consider this another competitive threat. Obviously, there's a lot of them, and there's some that are larger than others. Some of them are paradigm shifts. But don't lose your faith and confidence in what you're doing and what your value proposition is. I'm saying you can't go to sleep and not think about these things and work on them and try and address them. But there's so much more to being a competent provider, distributor in the healthcare, manufacturer in the marketplace than the ease of which, than consumerism. Consumerism is something we all need to respond to, the lack of patience, but there's so much that's not delivered by a lot of the e-commerce providers that's essential to being a long-term strategy to be a healthcare partner. Whether you're a partner to a physician practice group, whether you're a partner to a patient, whether it's somebody receiving end-of-life care in their home, an e-commerce company that struggles with returns and technical competency and the rest of those things is not going to displace us if you're smart about how you adjust your business. The other thing is they're looking. Some of the big players are looking at forming powerful, vertically integrated partnerships, not in the sense of getting into manufacturing, but combining with payers and. They're going to be well-financed, they're going to have smart people, and you're going to have to pay attention to how they impact the industry when they actually fully formulate and start to execute on a plan. So just don't lose your faith, pay attention to what's going on, be smart about watching it closely and how you can respond to it to reposition yourself. Upheaval is a word that Jerry LaDuca used. There will be magnitudes of change that we're not all used to, and it's going to come quicker than it used to. But the Health Industry Distributor Association might be called something else. The professional women in healthcare might be called something else, but they're going to exist 10, 15, 20 years from now, and they're going to be responding to the needs of the folks that are the next generation of what we're doing today. So keep your confidence, be smart about what you do, and don't let anybody roll over you with the gloom and doom that change is always going to be bad.
Colleen?
I just want to come back to something that a couple of folks have said, and you're hitting on it here. And I used to have the pleasure of working with a lot of CEOs from around the country who ran big integrated delivery networks. And one of them always came back to said, you know what, sooner or later, the human body gets tired and it just wants to lay down. And there's always going to be a need for beds and hospitals and physicians. And you know what, that kind of care doesn't come in a box. And so to your point, we're going to be around, we're going to have to do things differently, and back to that human aspect of what it means, doctor to patient.
Jerry?
People, I still believe, want to do business with folks that they know, like, and trust. The e-commerce market that's out there is a disruptor. It's just a new method of distribution that's out there. You lose the human element. There's no one to talk about features and benefits, or which products will serve a purpose, or will negotiate price points, or have a return when it was damaged. There's the whole personal side of it. So it's a convenience factor for people that are used to buying in that fashion. I do believe that it'll also push traditional distribution to revisit how they're doing business and to improve maybe speed to market and how they take orders and maybe have an electronic model towards that and to take their benefit of the experience that they have in the breadth of product lines and change the business models of how they go to market and distribution. So I think it's just another push of what's going to happen.
Do you have time for just a quick story on this question? So this is a real life business story, and it's about an incontinence e-commerce provider. And their one model was a subscription-based model. People don't want to buy that. And sometimes it's personal embarrassment. They don't like to go to the store to get that product if they need it at home. So it's a dignity issue. This one company tried to create a subscription model where they would try and get the customer's credit card, and they would bang the credit card, every so often according to your need. It was a cash-based business. It wasn't reimbursement-driven. And then there was another guy that decided he was going to go with a different model. Again, real-life story. Instead of a subscription-based model, he told his customers, how about if somebody just calls you about the time we think that you'll need more product and has a conversation with you about how you like the product. Is it serving your needs? Is our packaging protecting your dignity with your family members and your friends? And I watched that business take off because they had the humanity in the business to talk to people, not just bang their credit card when they needed incontinence products again. So take that lesson to heart, keep the humanity in what you're doing and everything that you're doing.
Well, I think that's, we're a little bit over time, but I think that's a great way to end the session. So please join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you, Matt, and our panel. Let's please welcome back to the stage Rochelle Ferrara.
Well, thank you, Matt, and to our panelists. What a fantastic leadership panel this morning. There were so many wonderful insights that I took down, and there's not a way possible I'm going to be able to recap them in time, but I really wanted to just highlight a couple of points that I took away that you probably did as well. Of course, some of the key characteristics that really were taken away from such a powerful, insightful, and I would just say authentic panel this morning were courage, humility, work ethic, Jerry. But what hit home is some of the discussion about going into a business situation, whether you're a new leader or you're going into a new team, and really just taking the time to listen, not going in with blazing guns, and giving your team, the subject matter experts, an opportunity to really teach you and learn from them and not make fast decisions. Do a lot of listening. So that was a key point that hit home. Another area is the panelists this morning talked a lot about the culture and the soft skills that were so important when it comes to leading a team and being a strong leader. Some of the things that came out were ask what needs to be done, stay very connected to your people, something that Mark brought out. Ask what's important to you. Colleen brought that out, especially when you're going through so many different changes, such as an integration within your organization. Also some of the harder skills as well. Mark, you also brought out, as much as the culture is important and keeping the team up, at the end of the day, we got to be good business people, right? We're also responsible as leaders to be financially sustainable. So that's a whole nother side of balancing out. And then what was really great was at the end of the day, being healthcare leaders, we are going through a massive amount of change. And that really is going to lead us up to our keynote speaker this afternoon, Valerie Burton. So we are going to go on a break now in a few minutes, but we're really going to talk about, and I don't want to take away from her, but the leadership team today during the panel talked a lot about how do they navigate as leaders through change in healthcare. And we do go back to that human element, and that's what's so unique about our industry. So we really appreciated those insights. So thank you again to our esteemed panelists and Matt for leading us through that. We truly appreciated your time today. Thank you. So now we're going to go on a brief break, and we're going to reconvene at 10 a.m. Thank you.